All right. Well, thank you very much, Stan the Rhino Efferding, for being in the Blaze Camp Performance podcast. Welcome, welcome. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Stan, so everybody can get to know you a little.
Thanks for having me on, brother. I'm just a lifelong meat neck, just a guy who fell in love with the iron as a teenager, and I've just been lifting, competing, became an IFBB pro and a world record power lifter. And now at 56, I'm more of a coach, strength and conditioning coach, nutritionist for a lot of athletes all over the world. It's been an exciting ride.
That's amazing, man. Thank you. We met in hybrid with Dr. Pat and the Muscle Doc and Jordan. Everybody, just it's an amazing experience having them there and getting to know you a little bit about what you do with the pro athletes. And when I started to backtrack and say, let me go, just kind of look at everything from Stan over time. I wanted to learn more and more about the specifics of the vertical diet and how it applied to a lot of the athletes that you've had and clients that you had over time. So I think it's a great place to stand, a great place to stand on, because I think it's Spanish and then I have to translate it and I have to ask you. But I think it's a great place to start with and stand on that, everything that we have to do with fitness. So I just wanted to dive right into some of the questions. But now that listeners can know what you've done and they can look at some of the stuff you have already recorded, I just want to ask you, just to get started right away. I know that you've been lifting weights. I know that you have all the accolades in lifting and everything, but your shirt says it all. I know that you've been advocating for the vertical diet, and I want to get to know it from you. What is the vertical diet? And then we'll talk about fitness.
Yeah, it's really became everything that I wanted my clients to know and do. So I didn't have to keep repeating myself. So it's a compilation of just everything that I've learned and experienced from college to coaching. I was a high school soccer coach and I coached University of Oregon football players and track athletes and high school collegiate and professional athletes all my life. To competing, of course, collaborating with great coaches and athletes over the years. So I put together this really comprehensive program that included, athletic success, physical health, is multifactorial. So it includes sleep, hydration, digestion, blood testing, of course, calories, macros, micros, and all of that. We get into, everything for performance. And I wanted them to have all of this information so that I didn't have to keep repeating myself. I said, these are the things that are the big rocks, right? I don't want to major in the minors. I do, often have to talk to clients about things that I don't think are all too meaningful. And I try and talk about those in the book. I try and really apply some sort of outcome importance to different things that I make recommendations on. So that was the birth of the vertical diet. I've been using this type of program for years with my clients. And then when I started working with Hofthor about 8 years ago, he had me up to present it at his gym in Iceland, and it got 8 million views, and people started asking me about what program do you use. So I put it all into an ebook at stanefferding.com, the vertical diet, and then it evolved from there. Now it's in version 3.0. It's a kind of a living document, and I got version 4.0 I'm releasing soon, and I provide the updated versions for free to anybody who bought a previous version. So as people started asking me questions and I started answering those questions in the ebook and expanding its content based on what people really wanted to know, it's evolved now into a 225-page document with over 200 references to articles and videos and peer-reviewed published research, all the way down to specific diet plans, grocery shopping lists, things that people, were curious about. I wanted to make it simple. And I guess the birth of it was I competed in bodybuilding and powerlifting. I was a skinny kid, 140 pounds as an 18-year-old college freshman, couldn't bench 135. And I wanted to be a pro bodybuilder. That's a long road.
Wow.
It took me 10 years just to put on any significant mass, and it took me 20 years to become a pro. But conservatively speaking, and then people initially might be surprised by this, but conservatively speaking, from bulking up to over 300 pounds in the off season to power lift, to dieting down to single-digit body fat to compete as an IFBB pro, back and forth, bulk up to powerlift, diet down to bodybuild throughout my 30-year career. 25 years of competition since 1988, I've gained and lost well over 1,000 pounds. And I've learned a lot of lessons along the way because I've had over 100 blood tests throughout that time period. So I could see how my body responded, as I was gaining weight, as I was losing weight. I measured my performance metrics, sleep, all those things. And then I started, of course, doing that with my clients, having them get blood tests, measuring their performance as they were bulking or dieting. And that helped me to kind of fashion the vertical diet to most of it, I say, is to mitigate damage, because as an athlete, it's not necessarily a healthy pursuit. Health is the absence of pain or injury, right?
Yeah, but athletes don't. Athletes can't be fully absent of pain all the time. So
Right.
it's you mitigate.
You show me somebody who's never been injured, I'll show you somebody who's never won anything.
Yeah.
Fitness is very different. The ability to perform a particular duty or task. Now, the fitness level required to be a world's strongest man or a UFC champion or even a 14-year-old gymnast in the Olympics is not necessarily healthy.
Right.
And so a lot of what we have to do outside of competition or as we prepare for competition is mitigate damage. As you mentioned, we do that with blood testing. We do that obviously with, rehab, sleep, nutrition, and a smart training protocol.
And just to focus on that vertical diet, it's like, so everything that you talk about on the vertical diet in the ebook, because I watched, the presentation you did with all the views and everything, and it really, when you're talking about it, it seems simplified, but you've gone through a lot of testing and a lot. You said you have the fourth volume is coming out now. So the listeners can understand is when you talk about the vertical diet, why is it called the vertical diet, and what are some of the blocks that you say, okay, because I know sodium is going to be important. I know that the beef is going to be important, the white rice, like that's the popular thing. But what do you think would be the principles that you stand on and you put it all on the ebook there? Just as a summary of it.
Yeah, the vertical diet is about creating a foundation upon which you can put just about anything. You can't put a 3-bedroom house on a 2-bedroom foundation. So
nice.
I wanted to make sure that we had a very diverse base of foods that covered all of our, obviously, macronutrients and micronutrients. So I guess initially just to simplify it, and diet is simple. I could scratch out a diet in just a couple of minutes on a 3x5 card at lunch with someone, and it would hit 99% of what they ever needed to know. Calories are king. If you want to gain weight, you got to be in a surplus. You want to lose weight, you got to be in a deficit. That's where we start. Next, you've got your macros, protein being the most important of those, and you want to get about 1 gram of protein per pound of lean weight. The ISSN suggests you'd like to break that up into about 4 meals a day, because your body has no mechanism to store protein, so you want to feed it periodically throughout the day. Where you put fats and carbs really don't matter in terms of weight loss. For performance, however, you want to have sufficient carbohydrates to fuel those anaerobic sessions and to help with preventing muscle tissue breakdown, etc.
Right.
And so I generally keep fats at around 30% or lower of the diet. Fats are important for health, for hormones, for sleep, etc. But fats beyond that, which provide you a health benefit, don't provide you additional performance benefit. So we're at 25 to 30% protein. We're at 20 to 25% fats. We're at 40 to 50% carbs. That's pretty simple, pretty basic. And now, people can make adjustments based on their personal preference.
And as people adjust, I see a lot of people so we have over 100 clients here in our gym, and I know that you have your gym of your own. Sometimes people walk in the door and they say, well, I'm not used to breakfast. I don't eat breakfast. And then, I just fast. I do intermittent fasting, and that's popular. But what is your take on how people mitigate, or how can they mitigate that? Because sometimes they'll come in and their muscle mass is not there how we want it to be or how it could be, or their energy levels are not there, or they just accumulate so much. For us, in our experience, they accumulate so much hunger fatigue over time that they'll end up throwing it away when they can't handle their hunger on the weekends. But what have you seen about that? Because, I would like for people to break down their proteins throughout the day. But from that standpoint, where do you stand on that?
Well, the most important thing for someone who is significantly overweight is to lose weight. 95% of health benefits come from weight loss itself, irrespective of diet. And so that would be a priority. I've always said the best exercise is the one you'll do, and the best diet is the one you'll follow. I coined the term many years ago, compliance is the science. So if a client comes to me and they want to lose weight and they say they don't like eating breakfast, or they say they don't like carbs or what have you, then I want to work with that. I want to find a diet that is consistent with their lifestyle, simple, sensible, and sustainable, and satiates them. Something that allows them, because that's the number one reason people go off of diets, is hunger. They just start overeating.
Right.
So I look at it, I put it in a hierarchy, most important to least important. Most important thing is we maintain a calorie deficit. And then in order to comply with that deficit, I try and find the diet that's most satiating and that the customer will adhere to long term. So those are the big rocks. Now you want to get down to some little stuff. I have keto clients, I have vegan clients, I have intermittent fasting clients. That's not what I lead with. I lead with a more balanced diet plan that lends itself well to performance, because I want all of my clients to both exercise and train, meaning cardio and lifting weights. Something that's measurable and progressible is training. So if it's keto, then I just want to try and, again, we talked about mitigating damage. So what are some of the downfalls of keto potentially? One, probably the biggest one for long-term health, is if they take in too many saturated fats. That'll increase LDL cholesterol, which can possibly increase their cardiovascular disease risk. Again, cardiovascular disease risk is multifactorial, and I can't just say it's LDL, although that is an independent risk factor. If they lose a significant amount of weight and improve their blood sugars and their blood pressure, then their cardiovascular disease risk goes down, whether they have a high saturated fat or not.
Right.
But if we really want to tackle all of the potential exposure to cardiovascular disease risk, then we would want to get the saturated fats down to under 10% of total calories. And so we would just replace some of those with salmon, olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds. But we could still keep some lean red meats, even maybe some eggs, depending. Again, now we're back to blood tests, because about 20% of the population are hyperabsorbers, and they will convert the cholesterol from eggs into cholesterol in the bloodstream. The vast majority of the population will not, because it's a esterified fat, and generally it's not converted. So that's my short speech on eggs. They could be good for a lot of things, but there are some people who respond poorly to them, as with any food. Peanuts for people who suffer from anaphylactic shock. Some people have egg allergies or seafood allergies. And so, that you have to dance through all of that. Some people are lactose allergic, some people are intolerant. So all of those things become important. But the second thing with keto diet is going to be the keto fatigue. They call the keto flu, generally because once you lose your carbohydrate storage, you get a little more tired, but you also lose electrolytes. There's 3 parts water stored with 1 part carb. So now you're starting to get a little bit dehydrated and potentially losing sodium. So we want to replace that. We want to make sure we had a hydration program that included sufficient minerals and electrolytes that you might lose, and that might mitigate some of the keto problem. Sleep can become a problem. You get elevated cholesterol. You get elevated fasted glucose upon waking, because your liver's pumping sugars into the bloodstream for your brain. I do see those problems with keto. Again, having said that, if it satiates them and they lose weight, that way outweighs some of these minor problems. But if they have sleep issues, then that might be a condition. What a lot of people have done over the years, I was on Paul Saladino's podcast years ago. Your audience might notice him as the Carnivore MD, and he was strictly keto, carnivore, intermittent fasting for years. Shortly after appearing on his podcast, he started including carbohydrates and yogurt for calcium, and stopped intermittent fasting because he wanted to focus more on strength. And now I'm kind of lumping in intermittent fasting into keto, but it has a lot to do with performance. It has a lot to do with, do you have sufficient glycogen in your muscles to fuel workouts? And the fuel for those workouts and that workout performance, it's not just that you gave it 100% of what you had. It's, do you have more to give under an optimal nutrition program that's going to provide a sufficient stimulus to then yield a result.
Yeah.
So
I have a lot of so we had some pro athletes that have to travel sometimes, and they will not know exactly
hey
where to
brother,
eat.
I know we're recording. I got to put you on hold for just 1 second.
Yeah, yeah, no problem.
I'll tell you when I get back why.
No problem.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's see if this goes.
All right. So what you're saying is that yeah, it doesn't really matter what kind of diet somebody comes in if they're trying to lose a lot of weight, just to get them started with something that they can comply with, as long as it's within healthy ranges and it's not affecting them in other areas, then we can lead with that until something happens. Then we'll have to mitigate and then adjust as we go. And ideally, we want to get them into a more just a complete diet of what's averagely recommended of breakfast, lunch, dinner, not a lot of fasting, and just making sure we have the right amount of carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and all that stuff. Is that the overall idea when you see an athlete come in? Because when we have, like, I'll have a pro athlete that's in another country traveling, and they don't know where to eat, so they'll just get calories from whatever.
Mm-hmm.
McDonald's is, hey, I'll have some McDonald's, I'll have the calories that I need, and I'll compete. And then my general population clients are like, oh, they must never eat McDonald's, and it's like, I don't know about that. You
Man,
know,
you touched on so many important things. I'm going to try and be concise here. You talked about athletes, and then we were also talking about general population. And again, the
right?
general population, we just want to get them to lose weight, irrespective of diet. And I hate saying it, but it's true, and all the research shows that even the McDonald's diet, the Twinkie diet, the 7-Eleven diet have all been proven with weight loss to improve cardiovascular disease risk,
Yeah,
lowers blood pressure, improves
yeah,
blood sugars, lowers cholesterol. Even the keto diet with high saturated fat may reduce LDL, at least initially, because of the weight loss. And then long term, you'd like to make the adjustments. Now, when it comes to athletes, you hit the nail right on the head. And I run into this problem a lot with athletes, is that sometimes they don't have access, or they're just not as, I don't know, organized or experienced in planning ahead and having their food, which is why I like meal prep. Um, they just need calories first of all, and protein secondly. And so those guys, I'd be like, get the calories, get sufficient protein, get 4 meals a day,
right.
uh, in a pinch, and then the rest of it we can try and iron out when we have more opportunity. That's when we kind of take the next step into micronutrients. Are the foods that they're eating supplying them with sufficient calcium, potassium, magnesium, iron, zinc, biotin, all those things, which generally come in a variety of whole foods. You don't have to be meticulous about it. But you're right. And the traveling thing's huge. I work with the U.S. Olympic women's wrestling team. And, one of them, Kennedy Blades in particular, had gone overseas recently and got food poisoning. She ate local food. And my recommendation, of course, I've been in 14 countries in all 50 states in the last 7 years, and I travel a lot. But I take my meals with me. I don't eat airplane food. Or airport food. I don't eat room service. I just, mostly because I'm so used to eating healthy foods that when I touch stuff like that, I always say to people who use the vertical diet for a while, you stray, you pay.
That's right.
You go to Carl's Jr. on a whim, and then they get mad at me. They're like, I used to be able to eat Carl's Jr. without shitting my pants. And I'm like, well, not anymore.
Not today.
So I pack my meals. I take a rolling Coleman cooler, and I'll throw like 30 frozen meals in there, and I'll take it when I go overseas for a week. And even when I'm flying, I take a
Wow.
thermos, a 24-ounce double insulated, metal thermos, and I'll put a meal in there. When I flew to Russia, I took 5 thermos meals and put it in my carry-on bag and put it underneath the seat, because I was going to eat about every 4 hours, and that's about a 22-hour trip between the layover in New York and then landing and then customs and then getting to your hotel. But I ate every 4 hours, and I ate what I wanted to eat.
So
I'm having a hot meal while other people are foraging for peanuts and stuff.
what do you do about the people that say, well, I'm traveling, I kind of want to experience the eating in the other countries and all that stuff? Do you ever feel like, well, I'm not gonna take the foods, I'm gonna and see and experience like dinners over there or anything? Or like,
Yeah,
how do you
that's a
mitigate
different
that part?
that's a different population. Now you're talking about the dad bods and soccer moms, the gen pop.
Mm,
That's not an athlete that just wants to experience the food. That, as I mentioned with Kennedy, and it's happened to a lot of athletes that I've worked with over the years when they travel internationally, particularly when they go South America or some of the East Asian countries. Uh, there's a lot of bacteria there that we're not accustomed to, and they end up getting some sort of Montezuma's revenge, and then it affects their performance. So I don't take those risks with athletes. But with the general population, all we're cared about is calories really at that point. And uh, now we just watch out for overconsumption of alcohol or just trying to get them to get a lean dinner and just watch out for like the fettuccine alfredos. Those things will the
yeah.
sauces and the
That,
creams and the vats of oil, the deep fried foods. If we could just stay reasonably within our caloric allotment and compensate for that on days that you're preparing for that trip, that's fine. I work with people where they're at, and I try and help them make choices. I had a business partner that was 50 pounds overweight, and he came down to Vegas, and he never cooks at home. He always travels. He's on the road constantly. And so I can't really tell him, hey, make this, make that. Meal prep to be the way to go. I want him to just take the frozen meals with him everywhere he goes. I traveled the whole country, and I had frozen meals drop shipped to me at gyms throughout the country that I was visiting. So, I mean, it's always an
wow.
option. But I took him to restaurants. We didn't eat one time at home. We went to restaurants, fast food. I just showed him what to order so that he could stay within his caloric allotment and still enjoy. Most of the time that's chicken, because restaurants generally have higher fat meats. They have the 75-25 beef, or it's just tends, and they cook a lot of that stuff in butter or oils. And so there's a lot of hidden calories there that add up quick. And you're talking steak salads, salmon salads, chicken salads, chicken dinners. Not my favorite for me personally, but in a pinch, you're still getting your meals in. And you're not. You just got to stay away from some of the ultra processed foods. That obviously the sugar laden beverages, the chips, the pastries, all the things that are ice cream, things that are loaded with both fat, sugar, and salt that just are so delicious that you tend to
Yeah.
overconsume them. So,
I,
and I
I,
guess that
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess that circles us back to when we talked about all those other diets, keto and intermittent fasting, what have you, in compliance. One of the hardest things to do is to when you're uh, is to not be too hungry so that you overeat. And one of the best things you can do is to eat less hyper palatable ultra processed foods. We just tend to overconsume those, and so more whole foods, less ultra processed foods would be high on the list of decisions to make so that you'd be satiated.
So it seems amazing, and it's I know I'm simplifying it, but one of the things that really comes out to me is something that's very important to you is you have to be prepared.
Yeah,
So the preparation takes longer, and it takes a little bit more thought process than most people do, especially with general population. If they're not kind of prepared for what most likely will be their failure, then most likely they're going to fail. And then athletes, it's not that most likely they're going to fail, is yet there's a range of danger that they can potentially get into when they're not prepared to go into their competition mode in other countries or things like that. Is that about correct?
100%. You hit the nail right on the head. It's 1% information, 99% execution. That's why I say compliance is the science. It takes me literally a few minutes on a 3x5 card to show somebody exactly what they need to eat. The rest of the time, I focus on, okay, how are we going to execute this plan so it's convenient for you? And it's not just traveling; it's even at home. Can you meal prep at home, and is it efficient? And so I show them what meals you can cook quickly, what resources to use to do that. Again, the thermos to take, even if you're working from home, if you're uh, a real estate agent working out of the trunk of your car, or police, fire, and ambulance, or a nurse, or what have you, the thermos becomes almost necessary,
Necessary. Yeah.
essential, because you leave the house. You would no sooner send your kid to football practice without a helmet and pads than you should leave the house without knowing where your next meal is coming from, and being somewhat certain that it fits your macros, for lack of a better word, your calories and macros. Because when people go out to eat, they tend to seek something that they're hungry for, and then they'll overconsume it. Call that food reward. The
Right.
same thing occurs when you're really hungry and you go open your fridge. Now you're foraging. If you've got a prepared meal, then that ultimately, to me, that's kind of the best scenario, is that you pre-prepare your meals. You know when you're going to eat on generally on a clock, and you made it convenient in such a way. I get excited about things like a thermos, or things like a CPAP for people with sleep apnea, things like a Ninja grill, just because it cooks the food for you hands free, while you get to, keep along your busy self, and you can cook the kids and yourself and everybody food while you're still
Air fryer.
air
Air
fryer. I
fryer
mean,
is great.
there's just nothing better than those kinds of tips and tricks. And obviously, meal prep, whether you prep or we prep, and I'm not shilling for my meal prep company.
Yeah.
I started a meal prep company years ago for that very reason, because I wanted them to make my meals, and then I distributed them to all of my clients and now the general population with the vertical diet. So, but I don't care whatever, you
Yeah.
know, compliance is the biggest thing, and so the meal prep really helps.
Yeah, it's like saying I'm gonna take a trip to Vegas from Miami, but I'm gonna leave putting gas for the last minute, or I don't know about putting gas. I'll start my trip, and then when I need gas, it's like you might not be in an area where there's a gas station when you're gonna need the gas station. So might as
Yeah,
well prepare, have a full tank, and then you can go ahead and start driving. Then probably plan out before you run out of gas. Hey, I should probably stop somewhere and go ahead and put some gas to get ready. So I understand, because the preparation is going to be in order for you to be that compliant. What I'm hearing is preparing for it is huge for it. So thank you
100%.
for that. I did want to touch into a little bit into sodium. I
Yep.
know that was a question that a lot of my athletes were asking. Is I have an athlete right now that's preparing to go to Worlds for karate, and he sweats a lot. So he's sweating all the time, and he's drinking a lot of water. So I was like, well, you're probably gonna have to start with electrolytes. It's like, well, I drink my Gatorade. I know you're drinking a lot of the Gatorade, but that might not be enough. And I wanted you to touch base on that, so maybe they can hear it from someone else.
Yeah, I think one of the best interviews I saw recently on this. Now, for years, I've worked with Dr. Sandra Godick from the Heat Institute. She's a PhD in thermoregulation and hydration. She has a website called levelin.com, Levelen, I believe. And she sells patches that you can use to determine what your sweat rate is, how much sodium you sweat out per hour. You wear it, you train, and then you
Wow.
send it back to them, and they see it's genetically determined. Some people sweat out 2 grams an hour, some people sweat out 5 grams an hour.
Wow.
And some of that can be modestly affected by sleep. Uh, Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, I had him sweat tested. He sweats out 5 grams an hour. We did it with Brian Shaw, we did it with Hafthor Bjornsson. So that's the first thing, is people sweat at different rates. The second thing is exactly what you said, and this was addressed very well on a podcast interviewing Stacy Sims, I believe, with Simon Hill and Stacy Sims. She's a PhD, works primarily in hydration for athletes. Let me give you the nuts and bolts of it. You do need to consume sugar and salt with your water, but in an optimum concentration for absorption from the small intestine into the bloodstream. Not necessarily to replace the glycogen you're burning, and not necessarily to replace all the sodium that you're losing, but for performance, to maintain proper blood volume and hydration. You can replace the rest of that stuff after performance, right? So here's what the concentration is. It's I'll make it easy, because it's like 1% sodium and 3% glucose, but break that down. So take a gallon of water and put in 1,000 milligrams of sodium. That's 1 LMNT or 2 liquid IVs, or 3 thermotabs. You just have to look and see what's 1,000 milligrams of sodium.
Right.
I like to use a flavored, either LMNT or liquid IV, and then put in about 80 grams of sugar. I just use dextrose because it feels good on my stomach. Sometimes
Right.
if I use table sugar, it doesn't feel as good. Now you have the right concentration. I'm not saying you have to drink the whole gallon. You can drink water with your meals because you're salting your meals, probably not a big deal. But in the hour leading up to any hard training or a sport, you should be sipping on that. Not gulping big amounts of it, because then again, it's too much. Your body will start pissing it out.
Yeah.
You drink too much water, plain water, you'll piss it out. You put too much sodium in your water, you'll piss it out. You put too much sugar in your water, you'll piss it out. Gatorade's generally too high in sugar is the
Yep.
problem with Gatorade.
In
It's
the
good in a
ratio.
pinch.
In
The
the
ratio,
ratio, right? Yeah.
the concentration, yeah. It's fine in a pinch, but generally speaking, the concentration that I just recommended is something you can make a gallon, sip on it the whole hour leading up to competition or practice, and then throughout practice as needed or as desired. Generally, your thirst is the best sensation. If you're in an ultra endurance event over an hour, certainly 2 hours, then you're going to want to make certain that you're religious about getting that sip in every 10 or 15 minutes, just a few ounces, 5, 6 ounces if you can. It'd be great for football players, soccer players who have a long sport, 2 hour
That's
plus
right.
sport. So that is in simple terms. If you want to watch the rest of Stacy Sims and Simon Hill, I'd highly recommend it. It's one of the best, I think, summaries from somebody with the experience. But that's the protocol, and the rest of the day you're salting your meals to taste as an athlete.
Yeah.
As an athlete,
Not as general population. This is
I've
specific
never
to an athlete.
recommended. Yes, I've never recommended. That's where all the medical professionals started jumping up and down on me years ago. Even in the video, I said this is for athletes in hot environments with high workloads who sweat a lot. And I mentioned that it's for people that aren't eating a bunch of fast food or ultra processed, packaged foods.
Right.
Those are loaded with sodium with very little water.
Yeah.
And so the concentration does matter. The larger athletes need more, but I think that would be the best thing to do is just mix that gallon of water with 1,000 milligrams of sodium, and LMNT it would do that. And then 60 to 80 grams of dextrose or glucose, a sugar of sorts. Mix that all up. If you need like a Crystal Light for better flavor, or throw some ice in it so that you're more likely to drink throughout that time, then those are all good tips.
That's perfect. So that gives me the overall look on making sure that we have our macros down, making sure that we prepare, super important for everything. We go over the sodium, and I want to get into a little bit of sleep and training, but I don't know how much time you have. You let me know if you have enough time.
Yeah, let's jump into that real quick, because I think those things are obviously the big rocks.
Yeah.
Sleep, eat, train. Those are the big three.
Yeah. So some of the athletes I have, like, in this situation, and even depending, and this is all, like you said, multifactorial. If they don't eat the right thing, or if they're not training the right way or something, it might affect the sleep. So just tell me a little bit about, when you're training your athletes, what is the balance that you're trying to look for as far as sleep? Let's just say you can talk about general population all the way to athletes if you want, and how do you mitigate the difference, but it's kind of, what do you stand on that?
Yeah, I stole a phrase many years ago from a sleep specialist. Says the sleep is the foundation upon which everything else sits. It was Dr. Matthew Walker, who was on Joe Rogan. He's a fantastic sleep researcher. And if your sleep's messed up, everything else is going to suffer, including the amount of muscle tissue you burn as compared to fat for energy, including your hunger, hormone signaling, your recovery from workouts, obviously, and then if you're awake longer throughout the day, it's just more opportunity to get hungry and eat. And so in terms of weight loss, that it's critical. In terms of performance, it's obviously critical. 7+ hours a night. A lot of my big athletes suffer from apnea. They snore and wake up tired. They're holding their breath and they're not getting good sleep. That'll jack up your blood pressure and just hammer your recovery. So we introduce a CPAP for those folks. It's critical. I even have a CPAP guy that I refer them to if they don't have a medical doctor to work with. So it's that important that we get that resolved right away. There's a lot of tips, what I call good sleep hygiene. You wake up the same time every morning, get exposed to sunlight. That sets your circadian rhythms and make you more tired at night so you can sleep. Cool room, quiet room, dark room. Avoid blue lights before bed from TV and cell phones. Maybe a warm shower helps cool the core. A worry journal for some folks, just write things down, and set it on the nightstand there so that it's kind of offloading that stress from your head. It's good research to support all those things. I think those are the big rocks for sleep. If folks can adhere to those and get their 7+ hours, then that usually that definitely helps them with a lot of energy and recovery.
Right. And a quick question about sleep. When you say 7 hours, what about people that are not able to get those 7 hours? Do you recommend them to nap?
I do recommend a nap. It's not as effective. Here's the problem. If you have 2 4-hour bouts of sleep throughout the day, it's not as effective as one 8-hour. The reason being is that sleep cycles work about a 90-minute cycles back to back to back, and each subsequent cycle has a longer and longer REM and stage 4 restorative sleep cycle. And so those initial cycles of sleep aren't as effective as the later cycles of sleep. And so you do want to get the longer sleep is better than chopped up throughout the day. And then you've got your night workers, and now you got to try and look at, in terms of chrononutrition, you probably shouldn't be eating during those hours. You probably want to eat when you get up daytime. If you start eating during nighttime hours, it also starts to affect your clock.
And I see a lot of people that when they have that affected, they'll go ahead and take the extra caffeine and the extra helpers. It's not that I'm against it necessarily. I just feel like when they start adding the things that give them energy, they usually start to go into the anxiety a little bit more during the day. They'll be a little bit more into the, I'm really good right now, but later on I'm really tired. They'll have like a mixture of emotions throughout the day because of that. What do you think of that part?
Absolutely. And the caffeine's hard because it does affect sleep, adversely affects sleep. And so you got to be careful with that as well as drinking too much late into the evening, in which case you might, or eating too close to bed. It might keep your body temperature elevated, or you might have to get up and pee throughout the night. Anything that disturbs your sleep should work on that.
Man, that's huge. Thank you. Because now we have, okay, if you fueled correctly and you've slept correctly, just quickly get into training. Now, let's say we go into the gym, you have the athlete that's ready to go. They've slept, they've eaten, they were hydrated. When you have an athlete so the way that we do it at the gym, we have athletes that are more glycolytic. They'll need something a little bit more on the up and go, like a fighter, or they'll be like a track and field, like a 400 runner or things like that have a high glycolytic energy that they got to output for power and speed. And then we'll have like you just need bodybuilding, which is going to be more take your time and you need to rest in between. Like they all need to rest, but I'm saying like it's more slow it down. We need to really tear into the fibers that we want and all that stuff. When you're training athletes, let's just talk about one specific area. So I know you're training with fighters right now, wrestling, John Jones, like let's talk about that population, which is high glycolytic and people that need to have power and speed. How do you structure the workout as far as separating power and resistance training to make them stronger as you're working on everything? How do you put it together? Do you go through a year of planning, off season, in season, preseason, all that? Or do you have a certain model that you just scale up sets and reps, or you scale back down? How do you put together training for a fighter?
Yeah, well, we'd like a year of training. It rarely happens. We'd like an off season to build strength. There's no question. Generally speaking, you get pulled in 3 months out, and they're already starting to eat in a calorie deficit. That's a very hard time to try and build strength and size. You're just trying to maintain. And also, their schedule is so busy. I'll give you a few things that I think are hugely important. I do try and separate, if possible, strength training from cardiovascular training when I'm able to, and that would just be different splits. I would have them train, some of them train 3 times a day, and that would be fine with me. And again, it's not 3 long hard workouts. It's just because when you're strength training, it's ideal to have longer rest periods. And I worked with Henry Cejudo and of course John Jones and other fighters. I know how fast they like to move. It's hard for them to slow down. They can't imagine taking a 3-minute rest between a heavy set. If you can get them to do that, they'll see a better result. But they won't often do that, in which case you have to use antagonistic body parts. You might have to have them do a bench press and then let them rest 1 minute and take them over and do a chin up, and let them rest 1 minute and take them over and have them do some gripper exercise. So you kind of throw some fill-in stuff so they can keep moving and feel like they're at the pace of the fight. But you're getting what you need, and you're giving their body the stimulus that it needs to get the best result. And that is to give it a longer rest between that particular muscle group, so you can lift the heavier weight for more repetitions and hopefully progress that over time if possible. But the last 2 months before a fight, generally, you're just trying to hold on to muscle tissue. Another great way to hold on to muscle tissue is just use a lot of concentric movements, like weighted sled drags. You won't lose a lot of muscle or size. You're not going to build a lot under that scenario, but you're getting their heart rate up. I don't think that's ideal. If I'm doing HIIT, I want to do HIIT. If I'm doing zone 2, I want to do zone 2. If I'm
Right.
strength training, I want to do strength training. If I'm doing hypertrophy, I want to do hypertrophy. They're all different. Uh, but kind of the primary thing is I don't want to create a ton of fatigue for the athlete, because the fighting is the most important thing. And if I send them to the fight, to their kickboxing practice with heavy, tired DOM's legs,
Yeah.
that's a problem. So I do a lot of concentric stuff. We might sprint some stairs with a weighted vest or something. So they're getting a little bit of speed, they get a little bit of cardio, they got a little bit of load, and it's all concentric. So they're not doing any eccentric braking, which you'd get with say running. I might put them on a high box squat. So I'm getting rid of some of the eccentric, but I can still put a little bit of weight on them and not create a lot of DOMs. And then sled drags, of course. Anything where it's just push, push, push.
Yeah.
And limiting the eccentric load is going to help with decreasing fatigue. You don't want your athlete to have DOMs for 3 days. That's a terrible plan.
No, I love that you're saying that, because I tell athletes all the time, and I got this from Pat. It was, you don't want to machine gun your training. You want to sniper your training. If you're going to zone 2, like you said, use zone 2 really good. If you're gonna if you're gonna swim as a recovery, zone 2, or you want to use it for sprinting, whatever it is. If you're gonna swim, let's get the technique right. Let's do it correctly. Let's breathe correctly. Let's get that thing to be a good thing, and then we can move on to the other thing that we will do really good. We don't want to just shotgun everything. Like, all right, I did the battle ropes and the pull-ups and the pushes and the maxed out bench press all at once. It's like, well, did we do them correctly? Did you go through full ranges of motions that your trainer wanted? Did you feel the right things, or was it all shoulder? It's like, my joints hurt now. Now I can't really go to the fight because I jammed my thumb when I jumped up for the pull-up bar. I was going crazy. Whatever it might have happened. I like that you're saying that, because I love segmenting the work to the athletes and giving them. I give my athletes, as the closer they're getting to competition, I tell them between sets, full recovery. The further away they're from competition, I'm like, look, we're not at the high volume yet, so you don't have to take that long in the gym. You can go a little bit faster. You don't have to rest as much. As soon as you feel a little bit like you want to go, just go. And now I'm just gonna shoot you a couple of questions that some of the people have asked me. This is a pro athlete from London. So let's go with 3 questions only. So one's from a pro athlete, one is from a trainer, or 2 of them for trainers. What do you think more women need to know about working out and training?
Well, women, generally speaking, won't lift heavy enough or close enough to failure. And women respond to training the same as men. The muscles aren't different in terms of the stimulus. Women oftentimes will ask me, how many reps? And I'm like, all the reps is the answer. If you do 10 and you could have gotten 20, it's not a sufficient stimulus. And so getting them to get their reps in reserve down to 1 or 2, or even take them to failure, just because that's not really failure. It's, they don't really have the neural recruitment yet to experience failure. They need more experience in that zone. That's one. And then the how heavy the weight is. We know hypertrophy, you can get a similar result from 5 reps, 12 reps, or 20 reps, with decreasing loads, 85, 70, 50% loads, but not for strength. For strength, you need to be using heavier weights around the 5%, the 85% loads for around the 5 rep range. And so that in particular, also the big problem I think with women is generally speaking, they don't get enough protein. That's a problem. Calories too. And they're concerned that they're going to overeat. They start lifting weights. They think they're going to get fat. If they overeat, they will. That's generally what happens. Is they get tired and hungry, and then they sit more and eat more, because weight training doesn't burn a ton of calories, to be honest. A good hypertrophy stimulus or strength training program just doesn't burn an enormous amount of calories. Usually a piece of bread would kind of get you back to 0 on that. So those are probably the 2 biggest things with women in those calorie deficiencies. Plus, they demonize foods. They're like, don't eat red meat, don't eat fruit, don't eat the egg yolk, don't eat dairy, don't have salt. They avoid so many foods that are so valuable for them. Women in particular, calcium, protein, iron, biotin, which is why I have all those things in my diet. It was a departure from the guru diet. I wanted them to have a more diverse food selection, higher in protein. So That's probably
Yeah.
the big three for women. And then when you start to get into ultra to endurance athletes, high school or collegiate runners, now you're looking at the female triad: cessation of the menstrual period, amenorrhea. Obviously, we talked about low iron already, and then hypothyroidism is very common. Then their hair starts falling out. Those are some problems. Absolutely.
We've seen a lot of that. My wife spends all our time with the nutrition with a lot of the women in the gym. Its majority is women, and even with the pro athlete that asked the question, we talk about, you have to eat a little bit more. You're probably not eating there because I know they're stronger. Like we even give them bracelets that say you're stronger than you think, because I know my wife can take on a lot of volume. She could take more
Yep.
sets and reps than I can, right? Maybe not at the
Yep.
same way, but they can take a lot more pain than me, right? So
Yep.
I would say, listen, you could take it a little bit further. You could go a little bit further. Don't be afraid and say, well, I'm tired. Well, let's look at your nutrition. You probably need to eat more. And if they demonize foods because of what's on social media or fears or anything, that doesn't help them. So thank you for that. I think
Yeah.
that's really
And
important.
lastly, I'll say two things. One, it should be measurable and progressible. The nice thing about heavy weights is that you're generally, it's pretty easy to measure them and see if you're going to progress them over time, for women in particular. So I think that's a good incentive for them. Plus, it's more enjoyable if they deadlift. Maybe you put them on a trap bar the first time just because you don't want to, overcoach the movement.
Yeah.
And if they pull, 100 pounds, they're like, yay. And the next time they come in, they pull 110, yay. And the next time they come in, they pull 120. We know it's neural adaptation. We know they're
Yeah.
getting better at the movement. Really, they're not necessarily
Yeah.
building strength or size initially, but that first month is a hook. The
Yeah.
addiction that they get to,
Quick.
oh my God, look how much stronger I got. And then they dive into heavy weights.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate that. I think that's going to help her a lot. This question is from a trainer. What advice could you give to a young evolving trainer that has not been certified yet?
I'd say get certified. I think the NSCA does a fantastic job. There's others. There's just so much information, and they do a pretty darn good job of keeping it up to date. And then I would say follow for trainers. Who do we follow? Greg Nuckols from Mass Research Review does an extraordinary job. But just subscribe to his Mass Research Review. We know that Dr. Lane Norton does an extraordinary job. We know that Brad Schoenfeld's work is outstanding.
Yes.
He's probably the leading researcher in the world on hypertrophy. I would start tuning in to the experts. Those are three fantastic resources. Dr. Pat Davidson, of course. You can go to their Instagram and just start reading their posts,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you'll learn more than you probably would getting a degree somewhere. Not that I'm discouraging that, but this is the actual application of the information that these guys spent 10 years acquiring. So those are all fantastic resources. And in nutrition, of course, Lane Norton's another one. Alan Flanagan, Alinea Nutrition, is a genius. That guy is brilliant in deciphering literature. He's just a leader, and he's got his own subscription-based model. It's just outrageous. And then Alan Aragon is another one that does a fantastic job with nutrition that's easy to read and easy to follow. So if you just tuned into those six people that I mentioned and just started reading everything that they have to offer, you'd be shocked how much you could learn in a very short period of time.
Yeah, there's so much content out there. I just the last podcast that I had was with Nick Shaw from RP. So
Yeah.
it's like RP has been doing just so
Oh,
many of
that's
these
another one.
companies and guys,
Mike Israetel. Yeah,
Yeah.
I glossed over Mike Israetel at RP Strength. That's a fantastic reason. He's fun to watch. Although I'm a bit lazy these days. I don't want to watch an hour podcast. I want the 5 minutes of actual meat on the bone.
Quickly.
Mike can be long-winded because he's so entertaining, but I love the snippets. I love the shorts.
Yes. Well, that's the last question is from another trainer. Thank you so far, Stan. One more question is, he would like to know your approach to training as far as dieting and training for Stan. Like, how do you stay, in shape, and how often do you like to train? Do you train when you can? Because I know you have a lot of companies. You're busy. How do you keep it all together? What's your thing that it's your approach to training and to keeping everything together?
Yeah, at my age, I still like lifting heavy weights. I still think it's important. I don't think everybody has to lift as heavy as I do, but I think they should challenge themselves
Mm.
and continue to try and progress over time. And then avoiding injuries. I don't recover as fast. So my current protocol, I train every other day. I'll do upper body day off, lower body day off. I do more movements that aren't as, just like we talked about for athletes. I do more concentric movements.
Mhm.
I move a lot. I drag a lot of sleds. I swim. Uh, I take my 10-minute walks after meals, mostly for digestion and blood sugar control, what have you. Um, those are the big things. And if I've got a particular lift that I'm trying to progress, like if I want to get better at the squat or deadlift, I don't squat and deadlift all the time. And I'm an experienced lifter, so I don't need to, but I also can't recover from that level of fatigue. The gross load really dictates how much fatigue you're going to accumulate. We call it like central nervous system fatigue or what have you. It's really the gross load. And if you're deadlifting 700, you're going to get more fatigue than if you're, deadlifting 500. There's just no question. But there's exercises that you can do that are that will contribute to increasing your single rep max that aren't as fatiguing. I
Right.
like those cambered bar good mornings off of off of the straps, so
Mm.
I can let the eccentric crash down, so I'm not like loading a lot of eccentric load, and then
Right.
mainly do the concentric. I love box squats for that reason. I'm not very fatigued,
Right.
and I can still lift pretty heavy, and it transfers well to a big deadlift. So I do that, or lighter movements, unilateral movements, particularly for the legs. The Bulgarian split squats,
Mm.
the leg extensions are going to give you less fatigue through a full range of motion. The challenge there being, how are your joints, and so generally that requires you to back up and use a load that allows you to go through a full range
Yeah.
of motion, progress from there.
But
So
you're also living from the work that you've done throughout many years. So it's that you're still, you invested so much time and effort throughout so long that are you trying to maintain now, or are you still trying to progress as far as
I
size or?
always I always pick a particular lift and I try and progress that over time. And then when I kind of top out there, I'll pick a different lift. I
Mm.
was doing box squats for a long time, and then I switched to SSB bar angle plate squats.
Mm.
Again, less total load. I could do the SSB bar without the angle plate and
Right.
probably squat another 100 pounds, but I get more range of motion and less fatigue just because it's less load, and I think more benefit for hypertrophy. And then I jumped on the hack squat and I put in an angle pad behind me, so it's more of a modified, standing leg press, to be honest with you. But I just pick exercises, progress them for a while until I kind of top out, into where I'm not really seeing any more progress. One more rep, 5 more pounds, that kind of thing. And then I'll pick a different exercise. And I use stuff that doesn't hurt. I'm not determined to do any exercises. I don't think there's any that are required. I think they're all tools to get you to where you want to go.
You're
So
not biased to any exercise.
no, and I used to be like, oh, free weights, free weights, free weights. And now I'm just the opposite. I'm like, find the exercise that I like. Stability, particularly for athletes, because the unstable exercises, I mean, we could take that to the extreme and talk about Bosu balls, but even squats, you can't exert as much force on a squat because there's always going to be a balance component. And squats are fantastic. I love them. But your hack squat would be just as effective, if not more, because you don't have the balance component. And
Right.
so you see a lot of guys on Smith machines, and we make fun of them, but in fact, they have more stability on that, so that doesn't become a limiting factor.
That's perfect. You couldn't have said it better. Thank you, Stan. Well, I want to thank you very much. I know we're over time. I know you're busy. I just want people to know, tell us what we can buy from you. Tell us where we can
Yeah,
go. Tell us how to support you. Like, please, we need to
thank
know
you.
more.
Everything's at stanefferding.com. I've got a link to my meals. I make meals and ship them all over the country, United States. I've got Instagram at Stan Efferding, and YouTube Stan Efferding. I have a lot of old Rhinos rants that are still pretty relevant and fun to listen to. Uh, and then I do seminar circuits. I'm at the Swiss this weekend. I'll be down at the in that's in Columbus, and then I'll be at the Olympia in November, and I'll be at in Austin, Texas, and I'm traveling back and forth every week to Albuquerque right now, working with John Jones up until his Stipe Miocic fight on November 11th. So I'm staying
Nice.
busy. I'm keeping busy.
Well, that's congratulations, Stan. I know that you just had an amazing career so far as your own athleticism. And then now you have all these athletes that you're helping and you're growing the companies. I just can't wait to keep, as supporting as much as we can, because you've taught so much of what I've learned over time, and all these new trainers have to learn more from you. We have a long road ahead, so I thank you so much about just for this one. I know I might get into another podcast with you later on about biomechanics and training and all that, but
Yeah.
we'll see, man. Thank you very much for your time, Stan. I
Thank you for having
appreciate
me,
you.
brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.